All right. Now, what I'd like to do is, so Amy was talking about how we can heal information, clean information up. So let's look at that. So in the Photoshop drive, or in those files that I've given you guys that are on laptops, there is, inside the editing workshop, we have retouching images. And I want you guys to bring up this guy called Old Image. Oh, I actually have one already. We're going to use this as a way, and then we go back to the presentation so I can talk through. So I'm going to talk through our main tools for cleaning up images like this. All right. So we have a number of different tools that we would use, and there's different reasons why we would use each tool. So the simplest tool to use, the easiest tool, is this thing called the spot healing brush. All right. So the spot healing brush is a really fabulous tool. It just gives us the paintbrush dialogue. But let me talk about what each of these does, and then we're going to go in and see them in action, and then we'll probably come back to them and play a little bit. We'll have more time next week because I don't think we're going to get very far. Tomorrow. I'm sorry. Yes, tomorrow. Yes, thank you. That'll be next week. Good point. You're right.
There you go.
It's next week. So the spot healing brush, and it's important to understand. I really think it's important to talk about how some of these tools function. Like I was talking about the selection tools. Some of them use contrast. All right. The healing tools, the tools we use to clean images up and restore images, are important because we have varying levels of control. And that's going to be critical as we work on more complex projects. The spot healing brush is the easiest tool. It's a wonderful tool. It does a fabulous job. What happens is I click in an area of the image over the top of something that I want to go away, like a speck, piece of lint, a skin blemish. The software looks at the surrounding pixels, the colors and the patterns, and it's going to use programming to automatically create new pixels using that color and texture information to paint over the top. So watch how when Nicole just simply, the healing brush is nested with, so we have spot healing brush, and patch tool. You're actually looking for the spot healing brush. There's a difference. Okay. So, and she clicks, and now she's going to obviously make that a lot smaller. And it's really simple. She could just click, and it creates new pixel information. Okay. Now this tool is fabulous, and it works incredibly well, and Adobe has made great advancements with it. This is not a new tool. This has been around for many versions now. I don't know which version it was brand new in, but they have improved it vastly. It works better every single time they release a new version. It used to be that tool got fooled really quickly and easily. And what I mean by fooled is that it would pick up information that was not appropriate. Okay. And I don't even know, like, these programmers are so brilliant. I don't even get how they're doing this, because it used to be that this tool would foul up left and right, and it really doesn't. And you have to work to make this thing foul up.
So there's a couple spots where there's very faint lines. You can, and I already did mine, but let's say I was like, well, I don't want to increase my brush size here. I can click
And
drag. And whatever is under that black line is going to be what is going to be fixed. So click and drag, release, and it's gone. So you don't have to click along a line and click each spot. You can click and drag on that line, and it should represent it. Now, sometimes when you do that, though, you'll get a little bit, you might have to go back and touch it up just a little bit.
Yeah, so oftentimes when you're working on something like this, it's gonna take using tools in conjunction. It's not gonna be perfect the first time through. In fact, as you guys are doing this and you're having fun, you're probably finding areas that are starting to foul up, even though that tool is so good. Okay? Now, so this is the tool that's the easiest to use. But one of the things that we talk about here, and the reason why we have all these other tools is because it also is the tool that gives us the least amount of control. This, all you do is you click and then the software makes decisions from there. And what you will find is as you get into more complex information, i.e. areas of greater contrast, it struggles to create appropriate information. Like you can see here in the hair, look what happened. See how it went soft and flattened out? And it just looked, it kind of, you can see that that edit was made there, okay? So sometimes you need more control. It may struggle up here near the hairline as well to create appropriate information. You know, you see here, it brought the shadow down onto the forehead, okay? So anywhere where you have a little bit more contrast, it's going to struggle. It's going to work best in diffuse areas. Diffuse meaning low contrast. There's not a lot of texture. There's not a lot of detail. It works best in diffuse areas, all right? Now, the next tool that I want to talk about is
make your brush smaller.
bracket keys. Bracket keys. I have a funny story. I had a student years ago, and I talked about how to increase and decrease the size of a brush in class. And the next week I came in, it's like, all right, review time. How do you do this? How do you do this? I was like, how do you increase and decrease the size of your brush? And she goes, psh. I was like, yes, that is exactly it. Psh. That is the correct answer. All right. So we're going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum now. Okay. And this tool is a little harder to use. And can you go back to the presentation a bit? Okay. So we have spot healing brush. Lots of power. It uses, programming to create new pixels. Okay. And then we have the opposite end of the spectrum. We have this thing called the clone stamp. So the spot healing brush gives us the least amount of control. The clone stamp gives us the most amount of control. Okay. And the clone stamp at face value is a copy paste tool. It does what you tell it to do, nothing more, nothing less. So you are literally choosing one area of the image and you're telling the software, I want to paint this area of the image over here. Now, this tool is harder to use because it's easier to create pixel, you can create very exact things, but you also are going to get a greater amount of harsh edges, perhaps. It's going to be easier for people to see that it has been edited because it doesn't have that technology that smooths the transition for you. But sometimes you are going to get into something that is complex enough that the other tools are simply going to fail. That's why we have this range where it's like this one's super easy, but it'll get fooled and it will mess up. And this one may not, maybe, like using a club in some ways, but it gives you exact control over what you want to do. And typically we're going to use them in conjunction. Like if I'm working on a really complex edit, I'll clean up with the spot healing brush, then I'll get into a complex area. I'll use the clone stamp to fix things. And then I will go back to other tools and clean up the edges where I have unpleasant things from the clone stamp tool. Now, we're not gonna spend too much time on the clone stamp tool, but I do wanna show you the functionality. So I'm gonna go back to Photoshop, and the clone stamp tool looks like a little stamp. Now, one of the things with the clone stamp tool is because it's a copy paste tool, you have to tell it where to copy from. So yeah, I already see the error message. I don't have a source. So you have to tell it where you want to source from. When you have the clone stamp tool selected, you hold down the Alt key. And when you hold down the Alt key, now your brush turns into a little target. That this is where you tell the software, this is the area I want to copy or source from, all right? So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna have Nicole try to clean up this shadow line here on the forehead. So she might, source from that spot. So she held the Alt key and clicked. It now has a source. Now she's gonna move over, and it's giving her a preview, and her brush is actually soft. It's not a hard-edged brush. If there's a hard-edged brush, this would be a very harsh thing. But you can see it's giving her a preview. She can now click and paint, and watch. Did you see when she's gonna click and hold for me? See how it's got a little target sign? So she has, this is the brush where she's painting, and then it's showing her, this is where you're sourcing from. So she can cleanly now cover up this area because she has control over it. She doesn't have to worry about the software bringing in extra information, all right?
And that crosshair moves with your brush.
Yes.
So if I were to bring my brush down here and click, that crosshair has now moved. It's sourcing from the same distance from my brush. It's not sourcing from one particular spot all the time. It's sourcing from where I set the distance from my brush is.
This is the default functionality. You can actually change that, but don't sweat that right now. Now, Nicole is exercising great care, and she can do this pretty cleanly because she has experience with this tool. But this tool can be tricky because if she gets kind of crazy with it, click and drag all over the place, then all kinds of weird crap can start to happen. Like it'll do, like I said, it is a copy paste tool. It does exactly what you tell it to do, nothing more, nothing less. If she wants to give this guy a third eye, she can do it.
So I can click and hold. This is my source. I'm going to come down here. There's his third eye.
So you can do all kinds of crazy things now, okay? Because this is, but you can see the level of control you have. Now, for retouching purposes, obviously, you don't want to put third eye on people.
Although it might be fun.
It could be
You
fun.
never know.
I mean, some students love doing all kinds of weird things with this photograph, but So I wanted to show you that spectrum. Okay, so now I want to talk about, I know we only have a few minutes left here, but I think we can do this. We'll talk about one more, and this is kind of why I did it this way, where spot healing brush, don't have a lot of control, but it has lots of cool functionality, it works really fast. Clone stamp, you have all the control, but you have to be more careful. You also have a tool in between. So we have spot healing brush, we have clone stamp, and then we have healing brush. Not spot healing brush, but healing brush. And the healing brush is somewhere in between the two. The healing brush, you still have to source some information. You're giving the software some information to work with, but it's also still going to use surrounding pixels to help you along. So instead of spot healing brush, it just creates its own information on its own. Clone stamp, you have to tell it what to do. Healing brush is right in the middle. You give it some information, and then it's going to try to help you out with the surrounding information. But you have to source, and this is also good for these transition areas. So she could use it to work on this area right here where we have the shadow and the hair, and there's these issues. So she could kind of source over here in that contrast area, and then she probably
My brush is too big.
still too big, yeah. And then she can kind of come over, click, and then it's doing both. It's sourcing that information that she had originally to help it out, to give it more information, but then it's also using programming, you know, so the mathematics behind all of this to help her out so that she gets nice, smooth transitions.
However, if I click up here, this is my source. Let's click there. I come down here. There's my crosshairs up there. Unlike the clone stamp tool, if I move over here, that crosshair is going to stay put. So it is sampling from the same exact spot. So now, if you can see, I've got all these little tiny, and it's kind of hard to like point them out, copies of those pixels randomly. So if I come over here, it's putting, you can, I don't know, it's
You
almost
can
like
see
three
the
little
patterns,
dots. You
yeah.
can see the pattern that because it's sampling from that pattern area.
And this is one of the things that you do have to watch for when you're restoring an image. Retouching, you don't have to worry about it too much, but when you're restoring an image, one of the things that can be problematic is that if you're not careful in how you restore, you will end up with weird patterns in the image. And that's where I talked about, you know, it's good to go back and forth. So we use them in conjunction. Like she has fixed that area, but now it might be a good idea for her to use the spot healing brush again and go back and hit those patterns to make those patterns go away. Because the spot healing brush will make it feel more natural.
So I just clicked on like 2 or 3 of where that pattern was. And because I'm using the spot healing brush, it's now gathering information from around to fix those patterns and make them go away.
Okay. All right. So I'll let you, it's 3:30. You can stick around for a little bit and play a little bit. You know, we'll start to pack up, but I certainly don't want to introduce anything new. When we start again tomorrow, there's one more of those tools that I want to play with, and then we're actually going to get into, like, this is kind of like just a fun one, but we have a more practical vanity retouch we're going to work on tomorrow as well. So we'll continue with these tools tomorrow. But feel free to play a little bit. You don't have, I'm not like kicking you out just yet. Just yet. I will kick you out. No. Yes.